So, hello and welcome to the Bearded Mystic podcast. And I'm joined here with four amazing individuals, which I'm going to be learning from today, and hopefully all of you too. And so, I'm just gonna have each of them introduce themselves to you, and then we'll go over what we will be looking at today and what we'll be hoping to achieve. So, I'll start with Eric, if you can please introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Eric Putkonen. I'm 50 years old, living in St. Petersburg, Florida. Um, uh, Basically, as a summary, I would say awakening happened in 2005. I started podcasting and writing since then, and most recently is my YouTube channel is where most of my current content is. But I would say I tend to talk in a non-dual fashion, but maybe not the most traditional that can be classed as a specific school. So it's not really Advaita or Buddhism. I kind of transcend the borders.
Okay, interesting. Guruji?
Hi, I'm Guruji Brahman. I'm a nobody from New York, and I'm 19, and I've been reading the sages, blessed enough to read the sages since I was 15. It's my greatest joy. It's my greatest freedom. It's the greatest thing I'll ever do in life, and I'm just grateful to be able to talk about them right now because everything in this world is so fleeting. But how blessed we are to get to talk about this ultimate knowledge. And I'm grateful to India and Eastern countries for making this knowledge so popular and being so dedicated and devoted that for thousands of years to now that we're talking about it just because of their hard work. So I want to thank all the sages that led us to now because we wouldn't have this knowledge without the sages. So I'm grateful. I don't even want to talk about myself or anything, but I'll talk about how I started teaching, or I started teaching is, after Enlightenment, Nisargadatta Maharaj, he said, people will start coming up to you, they'll call you a Mahatma, a guru, after you become enlightened. And I'm telling you, it's almost supernatural, this stuff, like how it happens. Like, after Enlightenment, I started my first devotee, Kian, I got my name from him actually. He called me Guruji. So I took that name. It had a beautiful ring to it. And one of my teachers is named Guruji Amritananda. And ever since then, people advise me to go on YouTube to, spread this knowledge more. And I've had fun doing it since, anytime they talk about the sages.
Thank you. Thank you. Artem?
Hey, my name is Artem Boytsov. I'm 47 years old. I live in San Francisco Bay Area. I'm a spiritual teacher. Most of the people that find me through Quora. I'm fairly known on Quora. I have written a lot of Quora answers, which I later put into my website. So I have a website, true-freedom.org or .net, both work. And it contains a huge collection of my Quora writings, something like 500 or 600 questions, which are organized by category with contents. And my students are actually working on putting it together into a PDF book that's about like 400-page book. So I wrote quite a lot. And I do video satsangs every 2 weeks on YouTube. So some people do find me through YouTube now, especially after my interview with Frank Yang is out. I also do intensive integration retreat in person in Northern California. So we've done a few retreats thus far. People can visit me in person as well. And I work with people one-on-one or video and through other media.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Liam?
Hello, I am Lyam or Yam, or most people know me as Yamsox on TikTok. And in this body, I am 22 years old. And lately, I've been going live for the past few months every day on TikTok doing sanghas and just having an all-inclusive environment open to everyone to uplift each other, share positive sentiments, and relate in one another's experience. And I have come to spirituality through a very spontaneous way, as I'm sure most of the guests here as well could relate with. And yeah, I'm a student of life, and I'm looking forward to this conversation today.
Thank you. Thank you, each one of you, for your kind introduction. I'm going to give my little introduction, but more I'll be listening to you guys and share your wisdom. I'm 36 years old. I've been on the spiritual path, born and brought up actually on the spiritual path, and in the last, I would say, maybe 16 years, I've been focusing a lot on Advaita Vedanta. And for me, the more I just feel like there's so much more that I can unravel and learn, and especially now when you learn the beauty of the Sanskrit language, I feel like maybe there's a lot more depth than what appears in translations, and sometimes even if they're decent translations. So one of my targets this year is to learn Sanskrit. So um, may the gods support me in that. Okay, so the the way we're gonna format this is I will ask alphabetically from names, basically the question, and just give your honest opinion. And if you feel like you want to kind of talk about what another participant has talked about, you're free to do that as well and add that in. So the first question is, some of you may have already answered this, but are you enlightened, and what spiritual philosophy do you teach and follow? Is it Advaita Vedanta or is it Buddhist non-duality? And is what you teach different to the religious traditions that they stem from? So we'll start with Artem, and then we'll go to Eric, Guruji, and then Liam.
Okay. Yes, I am. I don't teach any particular philosophy, and I don't follow any philosophy. All philosophies are false. No philosophy is true. Life is not a philosophy. Enlightenment is not a philosophy. So I teach outside of all spiritual traditions. I use modern ordinary language. To me, all spiritual traditions are but vehicles to enlightenment and nothing else. So I see complete equivalence of all spiritual traditions. Some of them are more complete than others. This is true, but they are ultimately equivalent. So it's the difference is just the terms, the language that they use. So I can use the language of various spiritual traditions, but I'm not particularly versed or very knowledgeable about the nuances of their language. So I understand the terminology of Buddhism pretty well, some Hinduism terminology, some Christian terminology, but not anywhere to the level of like some hardcore Christian practitioner, authentic Christian practitioner would know. But what I tend to do is I tend to speak to the students in their own language. So they speak to me in their own language, and I talk to them about their beliefs and the ego and the falsehoods in their own language. So I'm quite flexible with regards to what language I use.
Thank you. Eric, if you can continue.
Yes. Yes, I'm enlightened. It happened in November 2005. It was non-dual in nature. So in prior, I hadn't studied anything in non-duality, be it Advaita or Buddhism or anything like that. So I also tend not to teach within any specific school. I do understand that as you're speaking with people and you're teaching, all teachers have to kind of plant their flags, so to speak, and make certain decisions on how they're going to approach. And so I tend to disagree in at least one way with every tradition out there, just because of the way I navigate things. I think I'm pretty close to Advaita Vedanta, but there's aspects of Neo-Advaita and radical non-duality that I also think are kind of right on. So it kind of is a weird blend, I guess. So things like, I will tend to say, Brahman alone exists. There's no other. There's just self. But at the same time, I'll say the world is real. There's free will and choice, which shocks some people in those traditions. And so, and there's reasons for this, but I tend to also speak with people kind of ideally from their own point of view to try to help them understand what I'm trying to say or point to. I typically will avoid all Sanskrit, Pali words. So, anything out of Advaita and Buddhism, I try to stay out of. I might mention Brahman, but that's just kind of a general concept, but that's about as much of a foreign word I try to put in there. I try to talk purely in English terminology, as I'm a fluent English speaker. I don't want to be messing with other words that have a lot more baggage that I don't fully understand. um, but yeah, it's a way of pointing at the non-dual, non-separation, the fundamental non-separation of everything. And there's different ways you can point at it. To sum up really briefly, I'll get back to the free will, free choice part. I've at times I've said, as there's just the self and there is no other, whether you say nothing is chosen and everything is fated, or you say everything is chosen and free will, it will bring you to the same place as there's just the self. The issue arises when you say, I chose that, but I didn't choose this. That's where duality comes in. From non-duality, you could say free will or fate. It really doesn't matter. It kind of comes down to personal preference. But that's just my 2 cents for the initial.
Thank you. We'll go to Guruji Brahman, but before I do, I know you mentioned Brahman is the only reality. So Brahman meaning the ultimate reality that is mentioned in Advaita Vedanta and in some sort of things. I don't want anyone to get confused with Guruji Brahman's name and
well,
and thinking we're talking about him.
I say Brahman, but in my mind, it could be also consciousness, self,
Okay.
ground of being, ultimate reality. Pick your term.
Okay, sorry, Guruji Brahman now.
Hi. So yes, so I would say there was never a point I wasn't enlightened. It's only the mind that tells you you're not. And to how I teach enlightenment is that I have no teaching. All I teach is the knowledge of freedom. But at the same time, the people, the quote unquote traditions that have been quote unquote in history, they're not actually traditions. They were just so great that they were remembered, and then their way they taught was then formulated into knowledge and then called a tradition. But these all people, even though they're using words, they might say teach through the goddess, they might teach through this and that, but they're talking with silence. And I know that might sound like a contradiction. If these people are teaching, if these people are talking, if these people are using concepts to teach, how can they not have tradition? How can they be teaching through silence? Well, all they're doing is pointing to silence. So in a sense that even if you say that, you're beyond an idea of teaching or a way of teaching or a tradition of teaching, in a sense that you still end up, you're like, for example, Guruji Amirchananda or Ramakrishna, he was beyond a tradition, but he had to use words to formulate and to make people understand what the beyond is. So in a sense that I feel like, in a sense, people in the West have not given enough credence to the sides in the East, in a sense that we're learning things from the East and then kind of, forgetting where we got it from, in a sense. And I just choose never to forget where I got the knowledge that I learned from. I'm a man who is I would describe this body as very loyal to the people who do it right. And especially the gurus, they do you the rightest, where they give you ultimate freedom. So in a sense, I've learned from so many different types. Like, for example, Siddhar Meshwar, the guru in this picture, he talks about how some people are ignorant. They pray to the goddess and stuff like that when they could pray to themselves. They are the self. There's no need to pray. Then you can also learn from Ramakrishna, and he taught through the goddess, right? So some might say, oh, I don't need the goddess tradition. I don't need this and that. I just, but Siddhar Meshwar would understand that Ramakrishna is saying the same thing he's saying. There's no difference between any school of thought. It all leads to the silence. So in a sense that I just have such a reverence for the East, in a sense that they clearly started this stuff. And I think the East really needs to be given, utmost credit. It's like I'm teaching this knowledge of freedom, but it was the East who led me to this knowledge of freedom. So I want to mention the East and the traditions beyond traditions that led me to this point.
Brilliant, thank you. Liam?
I believe that the self of all beings is enlightened, but I hope to never reach enlightenment myself. As long as there is something for me to look forward to, that keeps me present now and all that I have to grow. There have been times where I felt like I knew it, that I felt this non-dual awareness that aham brahmasmi, I am one with the Brahman. And then there have been times where I've been so profoundly humbled by the universe that I felt like the most desolate soul. And it is between those two extremes of life that I think my life flows. I don't teach anything of a specific philosophy, but not just because I believe that truth is beyond all tradition. And I love that sentiment that all traditions are vehicles that carry you to that destination, but also because I don't consider myself a teacher at all. I am a student and I'm still learning from so many traditions, and I hope to keep learning.
Thank you, Liam. Yeah, I'm. It's been very interesting hearing the differing points of view on this, and my personal opinion is, I get asked this sometimes when I used to go on TikTok lives. You know, are you enlightened? I'm sure you get it too, Yamsox. You know, they're probably, or that's probably a common question that's asked. And my response would be, it's none of your business, because even if I am enlightened, I can't give you any, and I can't give you enlightenment. That's something by your own effort, and plus, I think enlightenment isn't as exotic as it's made out to be. It's it's a lot of hard work. I don't know, I've not seen anybody instantaneously get it. I've seen people, even if they get that clarity, that glimpse, they've had to work on it, and that's been my journey where I probably had a glimpse, but I've had to work hard to kind of try to maintain that and try to be in that awareness. But it's really nice. I think we have a bit of time for anyone that wants to raise a question or raise another point of view, or elaborate on anything.
Well,
Yeah.
I would just say, when the question comes up, are you enlightened? A lot of times, the first thing I ask is, we should define what enlightenment is. Because we're not always talking about the exact same thing. And for me, when I say enlightenment, I would never say everyone's already enlightened and that's always the case. Because for me, the way I define enlightenment, it's a specific happening. It's an event in which illusion and delusion is dispelled, and the realization or revelation of what has always been the case happens, and that results in the cessation of suffering. So I would call that event enlightenment. So for me, there's a difference between that which has always been the case, self, and realizing that.
So just to get a bit specific, if
Yeah.
you realize that that's the self, how do you then practically live in a day-to-day life following that? Is that something you maintain, or is that something that remains ever present? Um, yeah.
I would say it remains ever present and requires no effort to maintain. An effort to maintain, if anything, means there's a believed illusory me that's trying to maintain something that it doesn't really believe. Once it's kind of like the old saying, I can't unsee what I've seen. If you see it, there's no going back. And that is automatically lived. That's the new understanding from which life blossoms.
Awesome. Anyone want to add anything?
Yes, I would like to agree with Eric, first of all, that this event, the revelation of self, or the revelation of no self, it kind of doesn't matter how you put it, is what most people call enlightenment. I personally call it self-realization. That's certainly the most important stage of the spiritual journey. I mean, milestone, not a stage, but a milestone. So that's the same thing that Ramana does Sahaja Samadhi. That's the same thing that Adi would call abiding awareness. And when it's abiding, meaning that, as Eric said, when it's effortless and you kind of never forget it, it's always effortlessly present. That's what most people would describe as enlightened state. So I describe it self-realized state. It's just a matter of preference. That's how we use language. So I reserve the word enlightenment for complete eradication of suffering, because at this stage, the eradication of suffering is far from complete. From a certain perspective, entering Sahaja Samadhi or abiding awareness is actually just the beginning of authentic spiritual work. And the suffering of the ego goes much deeper than the presence of abiding awareness. So strictly speaking, if we were to speak very strictly, then this moment of the revelation of self that is effortlessly maintained is the moment of disidentification with the ego, complete and permanent disidentification with the ego. What I call enlightenment is the complete death of the ego.
Okay, very interesting. Okay, yes. We'll move on to the next question, actually, because it's kind of linked with some of the answers. I don't know if I could ask Liam this question because of his answer, which was very clear, in my opinion. So the three that mentioned that you are somewhat or you are completely enlightened, how did you get there? And how can one what can one do in order to get to that state of enlightenment or self-realization or dissolution of the ego? Anything you want to point to. So we'll go to Eric, and then we go to Guruji, and then we go to you, Artem, and then Lim, if you want to add anything later, you can.
For me, I've sometimes got that question, how did you get there and how can I get there? And really all I can say is I did nothing, and all my efforts were not getting me any closer. I would say enlightenment is more of a grace. It's more of an accident. It happens to you, you don't cause it. Because the very me that's trying to cause it is the very me that shatters with enlightenment. And so what I talk about when I'm talking with people interested in this topic is I say what we can do at best is create a more conducive environment. And so it's kind of like sleep. We all sleep. But if you really look at sleep, sleep is not something you directly cause. It's something that you let happen. It happens to you. If you have an important meeting the next morning and you go to bed with the idea, I must fall asleep, it's vitally important I fall asleep, for some reason, you just can't fall asleep. that craving, that striving for sleep somehow keeps you awake. And I find enlightenment is very much that way. Now, of course, there's things we do in order to fall asleep. We go into a dark and quiet room, we get comfortable. There are things that make it conducive. It's undeniable. That's why we all go into dark and quiet rooms when we want to get a good sleep, because it's conducive. However, is it required? Well, no, you could be sleeping, sitting in the chair in the sun. So a dark and quiet room is not a requirement. Does dark and quiet rooms cause sleep? Insomniacs and people who don't want to fall asleep will obviously tell you, no, I won't fall asleep in a dark and quiet room. So it's neither a requirement nor a cause, but it is conducive. It does make sleep more probable. And so what I talk about is how to make a conducive environment for the grace or accident of enlightenment to happen. And in that way, much of it is trying to remove the drive and necessity of it to happen. You have to kind of relax into it and let it happen, as opposed to strive and grasp for it, because that would be like trying to fall asleep and needing to fall asleep. It just keeps you awake.
Thank you very much, Guruji.
So thank you for this question, by the way. I mean, because this is the ultimate, goal is in liberation. And it's simple. Devote yourself to the sages who came before you. You see, a lot of people, they grab knowledge, right? But they don't give credence to the people who they got the knowledge from. But when you are aware of who's teaching you, then it's like a cheat code. It's like a constant sharpening of your wisdom sword, in a sense that when you are aware of your guru, then you can constantly learn from that person, and it makes the process of enlightenment a lot easier. He takes roadblocks out of your road. Things that would have gotten in the way, they don't get in the way because you go to the guru. But a lot of people, they have spiritual pride and they think that they can do everything by themselves, and they go nowhere. Even Sri Krishna, who is called an incarnation of God, he's remembered as God. His guru was Sandi Pandi. But then the Western fools said that they need no guru. They don't learn anything, even though everybody learns from somewhere. So the problem is, a lot of people, the reason that their enlightenment is delayed is that they don't surrender. As Sage Nisargadatta says, a lot of people intellectually understand truth, but only so few are lucky to surrender to the Sadguru, because the Sadguru is God in disguise, leading you to freedom. But a lot of people see devotion to the Sadguru is like nutrition, in the sense that we're always devoted to something. So people, when we're focused on freedom, when we're focused on the guru, our minds are always turned towards freedom, in a sense that enlightenment is beyond the mind. You're already enlightened. But in a sense, a lot of people, they also want their actions to corroborate with what they think enlightenment is. So in order to do that, in order to train your mind to be what your version of what enlightenment you want it to be, because I'm telling you, enlightenment is beyond a state. It's beyond an experience of enlightenment. It's beyond an idea of what you think enlightenment is. So in a sense, like Eric was saying before, the less you try, the more you'll be at that state. So in a sense, but also after that state, a lot of people, they want to be prophets and they want to run off and say, well, I did it all by myself. I didn't need a guru, this and that. No, somebody led you to this point. Somebody pointed to the moon. He wasn't the moon, but he was definitely pointing to it. And the moon actually has a thread on him to point you to the moon. So people, they don't understand that devotion to the Sadguru is very important, because a lot of people say, I don't need the guru, but the guru is also God just as much as you are. So I'm telling you, for people watching this, if you want to see, a lot of people, they want the glorious road to enlightenment. It's like, oh, I did it all by myself. I went through all the spiritual journey by myself. But I'm telling you, the guru is a shortcut, a very beautiful shortcut to enlightenment. And as Sage Siddhar Meshwar says, one who says, I am one with Brahman, I have no need to be devoted to a personal guru or God, is somebody called overly wise. Because the reason somebody is called overly wise is because they feel that they did it all by themselves. And a lot of people, they fill people's heads with spiritual knowledge, but they lead no one to liberation. So the beauty of this is that when you surrender to the Sadguru, as Siddhar Meshwar says, he bestows his state onto you. So in a sense that when you meditate on the master, you gain freedom, you become the master. So in a sense that you start to liberate others. But you have the problem is that you have a lot of people who aren't pure and they aren't surrendering. I love people who, they spread the knowledge of the sages, but they don't claim that they're enlightened, in a sense, when they're not enlightened. You see a lot of people, they're trying to get the glory of a sage without being a sage themselves. But the people who, they spread the glory of the sages and the enlightened masters, they end up naturally becoming enlightened because of that selfless love to the sages. It kills. So that's another thing of beauty, Guru Bhakti, is it kills selfishness. So in a sense, you don't care for fame, but as Siddhar Meshwar says, you get fame. So it's beautiful in a sense. And you'll see that, notice how all the sages, even Sri Krishna, who are remembered in history, they always had a guru. Even Lord Maitreya, he had 24 gurus. Everybody who's remembered in history has a guru. I'm telling you, that's not a coincidence. That's not a coincidence at all. I'm telling you, at all.
Thank you, Guruji. We'll go to Artem now, and then we'll go to you, Liam.
Jigeta is your name, right?
You could call me Guruji. Guruji.
I'm gonna call you Guruji if you're gonna call me Lord Buddha.
Say it again.
If you're going to call me Lord Buddha, I'm going to call you Guruji.
I guess we'll call each other nothing then.
Okay, Jigeta, right? Who is your guru?
That's not my name.
Okay, who's your guru?
I have a lot of gurus. Nisargadatta Maharaj, Siddhar Meshwar, Madhusudana, Ashravakta, Ananda. We could go all day long. I have a lot of credit to give.
Are they all dead?
They're not all dead actually. I have an alive master named Madhusudana, Sri Madhusudana.
Great. Okay, perfect. Thank you for telling me that. I thought that maybe they were all dead, so at least you have one alive one, which is good. Okay, so I hope you spend time with him. So I wanted to mention something. Well, first of all, Yes, the guru can intensify the spiritual process for sure, but there are no shortcuts on the spiritual path. This is a delusion. The working with the guru would be actually more difficult precisely for that reason. The spiritual path is actually the path of suffering. The spiritual path is about revealing the unconscious suffering on the ego to the level of consciousness, and a good guru can do this more efficiently than anyone else. But it's not like you can avoid the suffering of the ego.
Well, nobody said you can avoid the suffering of the ego, but the reason I say it's a shortcut is because, as I said before, it's taking roadblocks out of your road. So things you would have had trouble figuring out on your own, the guru has knowledge of it already. So he increases your discriminating power. That's why I call it a shortcut. Obviously, I suffered a lot. This is the reason. Everybody who goes to enlightenment has suffered a lot in their life. So I definitely understand that, you know, I know you want it to be called Lord Buddha, but you seem to be a little off. But I'm saying that I'm not saying that, you know, it's like, oh, it's a fast track to enlightenment. There will be a lot of suffering. Sage Nisargadatta lost his wife, his daughter, he lost his business, he lost a lot but he got enlightened in 3 years with the Sadhguru. So what I'm explaining with the shortcut is I'm not saying it makes it easier, but it also does in a way because it increases your discriminating power. So it's like things you would have had to figure out on your own, the guru already figured it out already. So it's like, what is there to figure out when he has the lessons and you learn through his life lessons? For example, Shankar Maharaj, as you're growing, you know, a lot of people, you mentioned Lord Buddha, a lot of people, they get caught up in like the version of Lord Buddha, oh, this behavior. But then when you see a Shankar Maharaj, who he used to carry alcohol around in brandy, in your mind, that is a shortcut. You're saying, oh shit, like I thought Lord Buddha, being a vegetarian, not drinking alcohol at all, behaving this certain way is enlightenment. But then I see Guru Shankar Maharaj, okay, that's a shortcut. So we may have I like to give credit to the people who made my path easier. So we might have a different, you know, version, or, you know, we might have different love for our teachers, but I like to give credit to the gurus and say that they just make the path to enlightenment easier. That's why thousands of sages have given credit to their gurus. That gurus are a shortcut to enlightenment. They definitely are. And not in the sense that you're thinking simply, in the sense I'm saying, oh, it makes it like you won't have to go through any suffering. The universe doesn't play, Kali doesn't play like that. You will have to go through pain. As Anandamayi Ma said, suffering is the path to bliss. But you know why Anandamayi Ma is a shortcut to that? Because she told me suffering is the path to bliss, which made me accept suffering easier. So she is a beautiful shortcut. So I will give, they definitely are. So Guru does not make it harder at all. Actually, and the Guru, if you know how to listen, the Guru makes your life a lot fucking easier. So the Guru is a beautiful shortcut. Thank you so much. But I love talking about the gurus. So thank you. I want to thank you again for this opportunity. I love talking about the gurus. Thank you. I love giving credit to my teachers.
My friend, could you please not interrupt me next time?
I will interrupt you if I feel like you're not even responding to my point correctly. So I'm not trying to waste people's time and with you talking and feeling like first of all, you said what I said was delusion. It's like they say the biggest fool is a man who thinks he knows. It's like you're talking, wasting people's time, and you're not even responding to what I was saying properly. So it's like I'm not gonna say Nisargadatta says, I don't adhere to social etiquette. I adhere to truth. So it's like I don't have time to waste to listen to you respond to something I wasn't even talking about. I'm sorry. It's
Rahul, is it possible to arrange it in such a way that I will not be
just so I can make it clear, what we'll do, if you can please answer the question, and then if there's anything you want to rebuke later, I will give that opportunity for sure to do that. So if you disagree with someone's whatever they said, anyone, you can I'll give that opportunity at the end of everyone's answers to do that for sure. Is that okay?
Are you talking to me?
To everyone. This is to everyone.
Okay.
He's talking to everybody, and the guru question, I think, is your next question.
Yeah,
Rahul.
so I didn't want to go straight into the guru question. I know that was his
but
answer.
Artem hasn't answered the last question. So
I'll start.
Yes.
Yeah, so I wanted to agree with Eric actually in a lot of ways. So that the yearning for enlightenment. So what wants to be enlightened can never be enlightened. This is very, very true. So the yearning for enlightenment, the wanting to be enlightenment, seeking enlightenment, this in itself, you can call it hindrance, but it's not hindrance in a way, because it's also the manifestation of egoic suffering, because the ego wants to be enlightened because the ego wants to be happy. And but what prevents us from enlightenment is the resistance to our own suffering. So you can actually describe the yearning, the seeking, the search itself as suffering. So I would not exactly agree with Eric when he said that there's nothing you can do, that it's all an act of grace. It actually felt to me this way also initially, but I think that there is a kind of a quite a direct way to abiding realization, which is through accepting the sensate experience. So that's what happens in meditation. If you meditate long enough, so all the uncomfortable sensate experience, emotional experience, most importantly, the bodily tensions, they are arise in meditation and explored and accepted. So you can actually begin doing this work even before the big bang of enlightenment. And that's what people call emotional maturity, you know, someone who is not running off with their emotional response and learning to be with your emotion, with how your body feels without the automatic reaction. And all practices that encourage that, like including, for example, nonviolent communication, will move you closer and closer to the authentic realization.
So I want you to answer, how did you get to enlightenment yourself?
So I didn't have any guru. I didn't teach. I didn't read anything. Actually, I started reading about enlightenment like 2-3 months before it happened. I consider myself lucky from this regard because most people who read about enlightenment get all sorts of wrong ideas, and then when a rather shallow shift happens, and they think that they understand everything. So I was very lucky that I wasn't spiritual. I was kind of just at the end of my road. So what Eric also very at the end of my rope. So what Eric also very correctly pointed out is that oftentimes there is a sort of a period of desperation and exhaustion. You see, like enlightenment happens when the ego is exhausted from suffering, when it's just no, none of this is working. The only way is inwards, you see. And so I tried everything basically. I knew poverty. I was fairly well off financially. I was very unsuccessful with women. Then I became very successful with women. You know, I tried to start my own company. It failed, but I had a successful career. So it's like everything, successes and failures, everything was tried, and none of that brought me happiness. So I was kind of extraordinarily desperate already at that point, and I was interested in nothing but meditation and well, not meditation, but kind of self-exploration, love, and kind of freedom. I started doing whatever the fuck I wanted, and it's like, okay, this life isn't going anywhere. You know, I'll just do whatever I want. I also went through tremendously painful depression with a lot of suicidal ideation, what would many people call the dark night of the soul. And I meditated, and also at this point I started doing psychedelics. And then I had a kind of a premonition, trepidation that something really big was about to happen. And at that point, like every time I would smoke a little bit of weed, I would get paranoid. And then one day, I literally did not come back from an LSD trip. I died there. And then after that, it was not possible to meditate, not to meditate. I meditated for like 3 or 4 hours every day. I cried for 3 years, almost every day. There was like all sorts of intense, extraordinary intense experiences that happened to me in meditation. So I spent like maybe 4 or 5 thousand of hours a day after that in meditation. So this event, this identification with the ego, that kind of feels like death. That's what I call self-realization. And I continued to meditate. I continued to using psychedelics until the point, and it arrived very slowly. So it's sort of a very slow process of dissolving the egoic conditioning. When meditation stopped doing anything at all, and even large doses of psychedelics do not change my perception of reality in any way.
Okay, thank you. Liam, we'll go to you now. If you want to add anything, Maybe what
Sure.
does one need to do in order to get enlightened? Because I know both of our answers were we're not enlightened. So
I think it's a wonderful paradox that we have been talking about, that the yearning for enlightenment can be perceived as one of the very hindrances for enlightenment. And so, how then is it possible to get enlightenment without striving for it? The golden tether, I've heard some people describe it, the final thing to let go of itself is the need for enlightenment. And now, if this question was asked to me a few months ago, I think I'd leave it at that. It's just a mystery and it's very abstract. But within the past few months, it's been a very recent realization for me that there is a very practical way of understanding this. And it's that higher than mukti, enlightenment, is bhakti. Enlightenment, if you perceive it as the highest, then you'll still be striving for something that's selfish. But if you strive for something even higher than enlightenment, from mukti to bhakti, loving devotion, then, as if the universe were this love distribution system, your only goal is to serve others. And by serving others, the universe offers you eternal happiness. And you say, no, I don't want that. I want everyone else to have eternal happiness. And so there's a little game that happens between the bhakta and the universe saying, here, I'll give you enlightenment. And the devotee says, no, I don't want it. I want everyone else to have it. But eventually, the universe gives it to you because you've almost earned it. And at the same time, that enlightenment now has a practical purpose. Its purpose is not just for you to enjoy being free from suffering. The purpose is because you've attained this peace, now you are able to share it with others. And from another perspective, if you consider this world to be full of suffering, and you consider the very nature of your soul, Atma, to have already been freed of suffering from time immemorial, then enlightenment isn't the end of suffering for you. It's the beginning of the end, because what truly gives one happiness is not to be free of suffering themselves, but to go in search of that freedom for everyone else. And for as long as the world has problems, which is just as eternal as the eternity of your soul, then you will always be engaged in service to others. Wherever there is suffering, there is an opportunity to help. Thus, there is an eternal help that can be done in each moment as help becomes available to you and to others through you. And if you consider enlightenment to be permanently abiding in that bliss, then one way to abide in that is to continually serve others.
You have beautifully described the Bodhisattva path, the great vehicle in Mahayana tradition.
thank you. Yes, Liam, that was really nice. Everyone gave very interesting answers.
May I
And
give one small revision, Rahul?
oh yeah, absolutely, Eric. Go
Because
ahead.
I heard Artem kind of respond to what I was saying, and I just want to do a small clarification because I actually agree totally with what he was saying, only in that I was saying you cannot cause enlightenment to happen. You can create a more conducive environment. So it's not that you can't do anything. It's just you can't do anything to cause it. You can do stuff for create an environment, a conducive environment. And the meditation he was describing, I think, is one of the more conducive environments you can create for this happening to occur. So we're saying the same thing. It's just a minor definition of causation is the only sticking point for us.
I would, but by the way, I would completely agree with you also that if you like immerse yourself in this conducive environment, right? So meditation being part of it, it's also on cost from the perspective is that when it happens, it will be always a complete surprise.
Exactly.
It's not something that you can predict. It's not something you can fantasize. You cannot imagine this experience.
And you
So
didn't
when
see
it
it
happens,
coming.
it's always, yes, you can never see it coming. So from that perspective, it's completely uncaused. You're exactly right. Yeah. So don't try to those who are watching, don't try to like imagine the experience of enlightenment, because the imagination is not reality. The mind cannot imagine it. So kind of surrender to whatever experience that you're having right now. And as a result of the surrender, something beautiful will start to shift in you.
Thank you. We're going to move to the next question in a minute. I'm just going to give my point of view. In my opinion, in order to get enlightened, I really liked what Liam mentioned about you get mukti, you get that liberation, but then bhakti begins, devotion begins. And I think that's very true because that's the refinement. It's very easy to get free and believe one is free. Again, that can be a notion in the mind as well. And the sages, as Guruji has also talked about, and generally from the East, that warning has been given about the idea that one has attained enlightenment when actually the full integration has not occurred. And that's why I think practices that we have, that Sri Krishna talked about, of karma yoga, bhakti yoga, Raja Yoga, meditation. I think all those things actually help with the refinement, and even to the point of keeping on remembering the core teaching of or the Gyan aspect. And I think that's very important. So the reason why I find enlightenment to be such a misnomer, and why I disagree with anyone kind of claiming enlightenment, is you're bringing it into time, and yet you're talking of the timeless, and you're talking about an event in a history that does not exist, nor a future that is going to happen. So it's very interesting. But yes, there is something that happens. I agree there's a shift, and I think I agree on that perspective. But yeah, in my opinion, in Advaita Vedanta is very clear. We're all enlightened. It's just it takes time for us to know, maybe. One thing my guru said, which I really, really love, is that he said, the destination is about going on the journey and realizing that the journey is actually the destination itself. And I think that's very true when it comes to self-realization and the process in order to get there, which is important. So this brings me to an interesting point, because listening to the answers, if you can also elaborate on the next question of why you agree or disagree with this, because that would be very important. So it's about scriptural authority. So is scriptural authority necessary for a valid teaching of non-duality? I'm going to assume that most of us are talking, or spiritual practice. We don't have to use the word or term non-duality. We can use spiritual practice. For a valid teaching of any spiritual practice, or is it just experiential insights are just enough? And whatever you choose, please do elaborate why, and what's your backing for that too. So we'll go with Guruji first, and then we'll go to Liam, then we go to Artem, and then Eric.
Yeah, I think both is very important. Obviously, there's no rules in the absolute, but I think it's important to give credit to where you learn from. I think in order to feel like a spiritual genius, a lot of people, they read spiritual knowledge, but then they don't give credit to who they were taught from. But, even there's a story of Udeva, and after liberation, he asked Krishna, can I remain devoted to you out of love? And, Liam was talking about after liberation, there's bhakti, there comes bhakti. Because it's like, that's it, Harmeswar says, without bhakti, one can't, be rid of the pride for the body. So in a sense that you have some people who, they have spiritual ego in a sense that they don't feel like they need to give credit to the people who taught them, and they take people's knowledge, and especially in Western culture, it's where everybody's trying to be like an entrepreneur in a sense. And it's like, oh, you sound smarter if you say, oh, you didn't learn it from anybody, you just did it all by yourself. But that's foolishness, because everybody learns from somewhere. So even Lord Maitreya, who is, remembered as a great guru, he had 24 gurus. So in the sense that a lot of people, they don't want to give credit to the lineages, but they don't realize that there is power and love and bhakti and giving, credit to where, like, a lot of people, they use terminology, but they don't know, where did you get this terminology from? You didn't, even the parent teaches the child how to walk. You learn this from somewhere. So where did you learn all this? Like, you know what I mean? So it's like both are kind of important in the sense that, you need an enlightened teacher because everybody learns from somewhere, but also the inner guru will lead to will lead to that true inner silence, that true inner nirvana. So it's like, you got to learn from the master and then you have to kill the master. But also after you kill the master, because there's no one way in the absolute, right? So it's like somebody might have a specific way and then another might have a specific way, right? For example, like Sage Ashtabakta, he was very like renounced, like he didn't wear much clothes and stuff like that. And then another teacher I learned from Osho, who had Rolls Royces, a bunch of different, he had a watch, everything. So it's like you can learn. There's so many different ways you can learn from, but it's going beyond a way. And every true teacher is going to lead you beyond a specific way. He's going to lead you to the way of all ways, which is freedom. So I think it's important to give credit, and especially to give really strength to the knowledge, because as I said before, everybody who's been remembered as a sage in history had a guru before them, even Sri Krishna, even Lord Rama. They're called incarnations of God, and they had gurus, they had teachers. So you have a lot of people who, and the universe, things get evened out in history. So it's like the people who were honest and gave credit, they also give credit. They get credited, they get remembered, and they get loved. But the people who they want to be entrepreneurs and they want to feel their spiritual ego, okay, they might, teach people this and that. Here, anybody can, go on YouTube and start to teach and get this and that, the algorithm, that. But when it comes to really being recognized as a sage, really being, really teaching and being your teachings being remembered in history. Like you have some people, they were like Sage Ramana says, a realized one, he could be in a cave and people will come find him and teach and asking questions on enlightenment. But then you have some people who they feel like they don't need to give credit to the lineages, but then it's like the universe doesn't play. Like they don't get remembered. It's like I'm telling you, every single guru, even the ones who didn't have a direct guru, they gave credit to like dead gurus that they learned from. Even Sage Siddharmeshwar, he talked about Tukaram in his writings. He talked about Kabir in his writings, even though Basheb was his main guru. So it's like everybody learns from somewhere, and that's how beautiful Siddharmeshwar was. Is that he could have read Tukaram and stuff like that and said, oh, let me take the knowledge, let me change the words a little bit, right? Subconsciously change the words and then say, oh, let me not give no credit to the author that I read the book from or something like that. But actually, Sage Siddharmeshwar, Samartha Das is not part of Sage Siddharmeshwar's lineage, but because of Sage Siddharmeshwar, his lineage reads Samartha Ram Das's book every day, a couple, and he's not even part of his lineage. That's how much love Sage Siddharmeshwar had for this guy, that he told his students to read this book every day as a reminder, because it's the overly wise man who says, oh, I am liberated, I don't need to do this and that. Liberation is beyond the mind, but we still need to train this tool of the mind to be focused on wisdom, because a lot of people, they're devoted to a woman, they're devoted to gaining money, they're devoted to this and that, they're devoted to their spiritual ego. But the one who has bhakti is devoted to everyone and all, and also naturally himself. See, a lot of people, they get spiritual ego in a sense that they think, oh, if like they get the savior complex. But as Sage Ramana says, a sage could see 5 million people die and he won't be affected. Why? Because the sage knows that it's all illusion. Like you have those people who, like, they want to feel like Jesus Christ, like I'm saving the entire world. No, you're not. It's all an illusion. You're not like and I love how what Eric said, and he's truly surrendered. I completely understood what he said when he said the enlightenment is not like, obviously, the God makes you do work to get enlightenment, but it's like even enlightenment is not, it's like it just happens. It's like an explosion. So it's like it's not even your choice because you're not you. So it's God giving you enlightenment at the same time, revealing himself to you. So I love what Eric said, that it's like enlightenment is like a grace, because it just happens. And it's like after that, you become devoted to God and the guru, because God, through the form of the guru, awakened your inner guru.
Thank you. So, Liam, if you could please answer this one.
I believe that knowledge comes from ultimately one place, but there are various intermediaries how you get that knowledge. I mean, of course, the ultimate source of knowledge is the source of everything, Parabrahman, but that Nirguna Brahman descends into the form of Saguna Brahman, which descends into the form of Maheshwara and Ishvara Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, etc. But all of those very abstract conceptions of dissensions of that source energy we call God, for everyday people like you and I, how do we have access to that? It's not like we have their contact in WhatsApp and we can just ring them up. Hey, God, what is the answer to life, the universe, and everything? So great sages who have dived deep into themselves and found that connection within themselves, they, of course, wrote these great scriptures. But the scriptures are also so esoteric. So the scriptures also have been descended into various different levels. The Karma Kanda of the Vedas turns into the Jnana Kanda. Then there's the layer of the Upanishads, Brahma Sutras. And then even those are esoteric. And so they get distilled in essence into the Puranas and Itihasas, the epics like the Mahabharatam. And that gets distilled in essence to a section like the Bhagavad Gita. And then maybe that is accessible to everyone. But that scripture is still going to be like a map. You still have to find someone that knows how to read the map. And that is where the guru comes in, the qualified teacher. So although ultimately the knowledge does come from our innermost being as the self, it has to go through this process of descending until ultimately it comes to us in the personal form of a spiritual master.
I really
And
like this guy.
although I can't speak on behalf of what it's like to have a spiritual master, I can speak on behalf of what it's like not to have one. And I'm so confused. I try to read these Upanishads and I'm thinking, what is the definition of this esoteric Sanskrit word? I try to learn it myself and, I end up debating myself until I get hungry and then I go eat and then I sleep on it. And I definitely feel the need myself to have someone who knows, who truly knows, and I could study from them.
Thank you, Liam. Thank you. We'll go to Artem now, and then to you, Eric.
All scriptures must be burned. So I'll say a couple of things. First of all, enlightenment is the natural state of the mind. It's very important to understand that. It's natural. It's not something that is learned. Conditioning is learned. Pretense is learned. Masks are learned. Suffering is learned. So enlightenment from this perspective is unlearning. So even to suggest that is not possible without someone else is the ultimate deception of the ego. Like you need other people to realize the truth of your nature. I'm not saying they're not useful. I'm not saying that teachers are not useful. If I thought teachers are not useful, I wouldn't teach myself. But it's yours. It's inherently yours. And so when it comes to scriptures, one has to understand that the knowledge that is pointed to scriptures inherently belongs to everyone. So it's not that on the path of enlightenment, it's not like we acquire some knowledge, but we drop the falsehoods, we drop the beliefs, we drop the lies, we drop believing the things that we think we know. And so from that perspective, what scriptures do is they speak to you. They don't speak to the true part of you, actually. They speak to the false part of you. They create an experience in you. They move you. There is an echo, probably. Jogetta, could you please mute yourself? No?
Hello, who's Joe Ghetto?
You.
That's
I'll
not me.
I'll mute it. I'll mute it. All right.
Thank you. So they create an experience in you. They move you. They move your heart. They make you confused. So they sort of point to different lies and belief and poke them from different directions. And that's actually a function of a very good, well-written spiritual text. Yes, there are descriptions of the ultimate reality, but as we described before, you cannot imagine it. So you will read it and just imagine it, and it's not going to be it. But the description of your current state, the description of human suffering, the kind of different poking and pointing to different facets of human condition, that's going to touch you. So from that perspective, the ancient scriptures are actually the worst thing that you can read, even though for some people it can be very inspiring and very touching. Absolutely. But they are so separated from us by hundreds of years of culture that it's not very close to you. Like the people spoke very differently back then. The words meant different things back then. The life was very different back then. That's actually precisely the reason why they are so appealing to the ego, because it's like some fantasies, the romanticized past, some fantasies of the past, like ancient wisdom, things like that. Whereas as you speak contemporary masters read. Whereas if you read contemporary masters such as Osho or Adyashanti, they actually speak your language. They're much closer to you. They're much less separated from you by translations and hundreds of years of cultural development. So they can touch you deeper. It's actually more impactful reading, just like being in the presence and the physical presence, so speaking to a contemporary master. So being obsessed with ancient scriptures and dead masters is actually a great way for the ego to never face itself and remain in kind of romanticized fantasies. So that's what I have to say about it.
Thank you, Artem. We'll go to you now, Eric.
Probably pretty similar to Artem in this. For me, the revelation, the realization that we call enlightenment is all about seeing. And that seeing is ultimately non-conceptual. No concept can ever grasp it. And even in trying to put it into a concept, you're already putting in error. So all scriptures, all concepts inherently have error. Not to say there's no value in it, because I would say scripture can give pointers at times. It can inspire. But I would caution against becoming attached to it and overly reliant on it. Even if especially if it counters what you've seen, the realization. Because like I said, I often talk about choice and free will. Well, the classical Advaita, because of the culture it came from, almost as a culture, they've chosen fate and predestination is the way. And so their scripture basically says there is no free will. Am I to abandon the idea of free will because scripture says otherwise? No. So I don't say scripture has the ultimate authority. It's more of pointers and inspiration, and to be held loosely, not overly tight.
Thank you. Before I open the for any rebuttals, because we have a bit of time for that. Personally, I think scriptural authority is very important because it is the manual that tells you exactly what has been achieved in the past, and it has been tested again and again. A text like the Bhagavad Gita being still remembered, still gone, people still going to the masters you talk about, Osho and Adyashanti, have all read the Bhagavad Gita. There is a reason why Osho did a beautiful commentary on the Bhagavad Gita and the Ashtavakra Gita. So, and plus Osho would be considered a dead master now, and somewhat Adyashanti is not teaching anymore. So I get the contemporary master. I actually agree with that. You should have a contemporary master, but a true contemporary master will always pay respect to scriptural authority. And that's from obviously an Advaitic perspective. And again, I also do agree that one should not get stuck on the words, and there are cultural issues that can come up, but that's the point of having a guru, which will be our next question, and we'll go to that shortly. But the point of, I think it was Lyam that mentioned, it is a guru that kind of helps you define those concepts that we may find difficult, and that's true. I do agree there may be concepts that we find challenging, or words, and that's the point of having the scriptures, and those words, they're echoes of a past that still tells us that realization can happen and is a reality, and points to a reality that is ever present, that I think we all actually are talking about indirectly. Yeah, I just want to give my point of view of that. And again, my master, my guru, told me that whatever connects you to that ultimate reality or that awareness, that's the truth. And whatever is not related to that truth is just culture. And with those teachings, you don't have to pay too much respect on. And I wanted to raise something that Eric said. I don't know if anyone else will, but in Vedanta, it's not just that everything is predetermined. There is an element of some level of choice that we do make, but the choices we have are kind of restricted, kind of like a menu. The McDonald's menu is not going to be on the KFC menu. You got a specific kind of set menu of choices that you can make. So that's the true understanding, in terms of that. Yeah.
But I would say, from my point of view and my teaching, I would say that creates an unusual duality. I chose this, but I cannot choose that. That reinforces the idea of me, which is the basis of what I'm against and what I talk about. But that's just my personal point of view and the way I put it out there. If the point of view of a more classical approach works for people, great.
Yes. Yeah, no, I mean, I respect your opinion, Eric. I mean, and also what you find to be true. I mean, I fully respect that. Yeah. And I can see your point too. Yes, please do, Guruji. And anyone else can follow on.
Yeah. There's no difference between ancient scriptures and what they're saying today at all. Like literally at all. Like there's no like Osho. That's why Osho talked about Ashtavakra. You can look up his discourses. He talked about the ancient scriptures actually more than he ever talked about any modern teachers. The only really modern teachers he talked about was Jiddu Krishnamurti. He rarely talked about like alive contemporary masters. Osho loved the ancient sages like Bodhirama and Osho loved Bodhirama. He was in love with Buddha. He was in love with the sages. So he talked about ancient scriptures all the time. Actually, a lot of ancient scriptures, you'd be surprised if you actually are knowledgeable about them. You'd actually be surprised, like somebody 5,000 years ago, like they'll curse in one of you'll read it and they'll like be cursing. And I'm like, oh God, oh shit. Like this is a holy man cursing. And they're like, oh, wow, this is so cool. Like this is somebody from 3,000 years ago. And like things like Sage Ashtavakra, like if you read his book, like if you have discernment and you can discern between what they're saying, like obviously if you like aren't going to let your mind be led to silence, you're going to always have confusion and always, oh, this is wrong. But if you have discernment, everything this is the reason they've lasted for thousands of years. Everything in the ancient scriptures, they're telling you the point blank truth. So it's very simple that when you have discernment, obviously you have to like for example, if you read Ashtavakra, like the Ashtavakra Gita, they call it the greatest. One of the sages called it the greatest text in the world. And I agree with him because it's very direct. Like it doesn't, like Ashtavakra doesn't waste any time. He was actually 12 years old when he became a guru and he taught King Janaka. So, and then the Bhagavad Gita, like, we should be very careful with people who say, burn the scriptures and stuff like that, because that means they want only their scripture to be heard. Because why should we burn other scripture? What the hell is that? That's nonsense. All these people work like 5,000. That's how people, these Westerners, they take from India, they take scientific discoveries that rishis figured out thousands of years ago. They take these people's knowledge and then they they twist it and then brand it as their own discovery. That's how, you know, things get stolen, and that's Western culture. They steal stuff, then they brand it as having their own. And another thing too is like, man, I'm telling you, like, I'm sorry guys, but like, I gotta be real. Free will and destiny, like, there's no when you read the scriptures, they're not differentiating between free will and destiny. Like, there's no difference. Like, there's, when you see the absolute truth, like, okay, I chose to pick up this Sharpie and use it as an example of free will. But what made me use the Sharpie as an example? God. You see, free will and destiny they co-align with each other. There's no difference. And that's, the scriptures are saying the same thing. There's no difference between what the ancient Enlightened Master is saying 5,000 years ago and an Enlightened Master is saying today. Because the reason people have multiple gurus is because the truth is all one. They had all different ways. Like, for example, Osho is one of my teachers. I'm a meat eater. And Osho talks about how vegetarian, like, people who eat meat are like cannibals. So, but I know Osho, like, I'm not saying, oh my God, I can't discern that Osho, I know he's just joking and he doesn't actually mean that. Like, even Osho talked about Sage Nisargadatta. He talked about, like, Osho would actually he insulted Sage Nisargadatta. He was like, oh, he's just some beady man that smoked, you know. But I know that they're both my teachers, right? But I know that Osho was just joking about Sage Nisargadatta. He didn't actually mean to insult him and stuff like that. So it's like, you can poke holes in these guys all day and poke holes in the writings and then, you know, take from it and then kind of make your own version. But everybody's, all that we're saying is everything that the Buddhas have been saying for thousands of years. People in India, people in the East have been saying for thousands of years. Those ancient scriptures, beautiful. I love them. They're the same as the ones today. They're saying nothing different at all. There's no difference at all.
You talk too much.
And you're rude.
You could use some of that.
There's no such thing as talking too much in the absolute, brother. There's just your opinion of talking too much. You're a very rude person. And I sense some jealousy in you too, since in a sense you wouldn't call me by Guruji. It seems like your fake spiritual teachings, and you're jealous that I get recognized as a sage and you're just some fake spiritual teacher who I don't know what you are. You don't mention any sages or past guru. You have no respect for, you know, the people who came India and the East. This is classic white culture. They take from the East Guruji and stuff like that, and they try to brand it as their own and act like some genius. But I see right through you, brother.
You
classic
have no
white culture
for the elders.
Classic white culture. I'm not even listening to this fool anymore. You're ridiculous.
If we can still continue to respect, we can have differing opinions, but I don't want us to disrespect each other. I'm talking not talking to anyone directly, but I think it's important to be respectful regardless of what people say or what their views are. I think we have to maintain our own discernment and our own calmness and approach to that. There are many things I've disagreed with, but I choose not to let that, kind of view my opinion of someone. And same thing, if I agree with someone completely or partially, that shouldn't really affect us either. But I think, Guruji, you kind of answered a lot about the role of a guru and the lineage very well, very fluently. And so I want to ask everyone else. We'll go with Lyam first, and then Artem, Eric, and then you, Guruji, at the end, to talk about what is the importance of having a guru and an established lineage. And I know, Lyam, you mentioned you don't have one, but you can speak a bit more about what it's like not to have one. Or you may see everyone as a guru, so it depends. And then, and I'll add and if you want to, you can answer this. It's not a major question, but can enlightenment be authentically realized without the guidance of a traditional guru or lineage? So over to you, Lyam.
A wonderful question. I like the trinity of Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, which is a very logical chain of reasoning that leads one to a guru. It starts with that Sanskrit root br, which means to expand. And you add the prefix man to make it Brahman. It becomes the personification of that expansion, that all-expansive one, the omnipresent, all-pervading one, which is a synonym for the ultimate reality, that which is within all things. And it's a very self-evident truth that whatever the nature of existence is, the truth of it must be Brahman. It must be all-pervading. But that leads one to a very interesting corollary, which is that if that one truth is all-pervading, then it must be within us too. And that part of it which is within us, that's known as Paramatma, the higher self. And so not only do we have this lower self, the jiva, that's invested upon with the power of an ego and intellect, mind, senses, and body, it is illumined by that Brahman, and the local epicenter of that illumination you could call the Paramatma, the higher self. But when we are unable to recognize that part of ourself, we need to go to someone who can, and then that's the role of a guru who has set aside their lower self and just lets Paramatma shine through. So when you are speaking to them, you are speaking to your higher self, you are speaking to Brahman, and therefore the guru isn't a second person from you. It is a divine mirror in which you can see yourself. And so I believe it is in that way that the guru is necessary to be a reflection of your essential nature. At the same time, there have been great sages who seemingly have not had a guru, although they might accredit one, like the great Ramana Maharshi, for example. His enlightenment experience was, what, at the age of 14 or earlier? And
16.
16. Amazing. And yet there was no Vedanta that led to that. Not in that lifetime, at least. But if you accept the immortality of Atma, the eternity of being, then this body must not be your first incarnation. And that leads to the concept of samskaras, past life impressions. So it is only my educated guess that Ramana had some profound samskars from his past life where he was just put to the edge of that liberation, and it only took a final atma vichara, self-inquiry, in his next incarnation to really wake up to this idea that who he is beyond body, mind, and the world, pure, awareful consciousness. And so who is to say of those great sages' previous lives and their connection to Brahman through Paramatma and finally to Bhagavan, the person who is an incarnate form of their true self? That is my experience, my opinion, at least.
Can I say something real quick?
If we can do it at the end, if we go through the answers and then we'll come to you. You can mention it in your answer later.
No, I want to ask, what time is this?
Around 5-ish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to be aware. Sorry.
This is the last question, basically.
Yeah, maybe. So we'll go to, is it Artem now? Yeah, we'll go to Artem now for your answer.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. What is the importance of a guru and an established lineage? Or, can enlightenment be authentically realized without the guidance of a traditional guru and lineage?
Okay, so I'll start with the latter part because it's very easy. So of course it can be, because it's your natural state, it's your birthright. So of course it can be. There's no question about it. Now the importance of established lineage and the guru. The answer here is it depends entirely on the quality, the depth of the guru's realization and the quality of people in the lineage. Most people in the lineage are not enlightened. They're not even authentically realized. They follow a tradition. They follow a teaching. I'm not talking about kind of right now. I'm not talking about specific like what figures in the lineage, but basically I'm saying most Buddhists are not Buddhists. So most people who follow the Buddhist path are currently following the Buddhist path aren't enlightened. And you can go to a Buddhist monastery and you will not see an authentically realized person there. Now, in lineages, of course, most of the people there have had various degrees of realization. Some of them were very deep and left students who they also taught and left writings and they were authentically realized, for sure. But when you're working with a guru, you're actually working with a person who is alive right now, and it's very difficult to discern the quality of that person actually as from the separated state. It's extremely, extremely difficult, especially if you have a spiritual ego. If you have a spiritual ego, you'll basically hate an authentic guru with passion. But generally speaking, the only advice that I can give is that if you feel that there's something off with regards to the guru's authenticity and honesty, then there probably is. So like there are a lot of gurus who do a lot of hand waving and speaking in strange terms, always wanting to point something to you. Like if you cannot have a normal human level conversation with your guru, my suggestion is to run away from them. So it's difficult to find a good guru. The problem with the authentic spiritual path is extremely long. So it's like from self-realization to enlightenment, there are years and years and years of spiritual work. So we have people in all degrees of realization. So from a rather deep self-realized state, but still with a lot of ego, to a completely enlightened state when there is no suffering at all. And the less of your own ego you have, the less of your own suffering you have, the clearer you see the ego of the other person. And the ego is also always abusive, actually. It's always somewhat hateful. And so most people teach from a place where there is deep realization, but there is also still hatred, contempt, and abuse, manifested in subtle forms. And so basically it's a combination. So when you're working with an authentic teacher, you're most likely going to get the combination of those things. So he will move you towards the right direction, or she will move you towards the right direction from the place of their egolessness, but then they will also move you to the wrong direction from the place of whatever's left of their ego. And it's good if it's like 90 to 10%, or it's like 80 to 20%, then you're set. You're in a very good hands, right? But if it's 80, if it's 20 to 80%, then you will need to like outgrow this guru and find yourself someone else. So there are a lot of people who find teachers, work with them, get some insights, get some realization, then realize that the relationship is abusive in one form or the other, and then outgrow their teachers, find a teacher at a deeper stage of the realization, more deeply embodied, more loving, more unconditionally accepting, and then work with them and sort of change teachers. There's nothing wrong with that. It's entirely normal. So the spiritual marketplace is a sort of a very strange reverse pyramid where there are people at all levels of realization that can help you to realize something that they have, while also trying to reinforce some parts of your egoic conditionings that they also have. So it's kind of a labyrinth, the spiritual marketplace. You have to be very careful in it.
Thank you, Artem. To you, Eric.
Well, I mean, enlightenment is fundamentally a realizing who and what you really are. And I would say it would be a bad illusion to think that you could not realize who and what you are without someone else. So I say it's very possible. And that's from my own experience. I did not study non-duality or Advaita or anything else before awakening. I had no guru, and yet it happened anyway. As much as people would like to say, no, you have to. No, you don't have to. It's not a requirement. Now, can a guru help? Obviously, yes. It's like if you're going to climb a mountain, would a mountain guide help you? Yes, help you avoid potential pitfalls and not get lost. Could you make it to the top on your own? Yeah. So it's kind of, if you find the best of guru, they can help. It's not a requirement though. So I have kind of a bit of a distinction there. And I'm not the only one that's realized who and what I am and become free of suffering without having a guru or scripture and things like that. I mean, even that was one of the contentious things the Buddha talked about, because after Buddha's realization, one of his first conversations was he kind of shared his realization, and the sadhu was kind of blown away, and he goes, well, who did you learn this from? And the Buddha replied, no one. I saw this for myself directly. And the guy was appalled. How could you? No knowledge can be found on your own. That was his belief. But there's Buddha, there's me, there's others. It is possible to realize without a guru, but I would admit it's probably easier if you find a good guru. So that's kind of my 2 cents.
I completely agree with Eric, with everything that he just said.
Thank you, Eric. Hey, Guruji.
So yeah, I love Liam's point that, see, a lot of people, they make differences. Like they say, they get confused. Like when they say when people are saying you need a guru, they think you're talking about somebody, but because there's no one, we're just talking about a process of learning. For example, on the Buddha's path, he learned from an aesthetic, and he learned how to control his celibacy. He stayed in a cave for a while, and there is, I forgot the name, but I think it was a female that taught him too, that did teach Buddha. Like, wasn't his official guru, but the point is like, when you're aware, like everybody learns from somewhere. Like everybody is reading something and taking the knowledge and then applying it. So it's just about being aware of where you're getting the knowledge from. For example, I like Liam's point that Ramana didn't have a direct guru, but he definitely from his past learned from, and actually Ramana quotes the Bhagavad Gita a lot, a lot. So you can say almost Krishna was Ramana's guru, not his official guru, but you could almost say Krishna was, one of Ramana's gurus. And Ramana also says Aaron Chula was one of his gurus. And if anybody knows anything about India, you will be hearing about saints in the household. Ramana also talked about, Ramana was from Tamil. He talked about this Tamil saint that a lot. So it's like, you learn from these people, and it's like, okay, if you don't want to say you have an official guru, okay, you like feel great. You didn't need anybody. But it's like everybody learns from somewhere. So it's just like, I mean, there is no right behavior in the absolute. Like there is no right way, like, oh, you have to do this and that. You have to do this and that. The absolute is absolute. There is no right way. But it's just like, I mean, it's just like I said before, the child from the parent's example learns how to walk. So it's like, whether we're aware and give credence to our teachers or not, all of us have learned from somewhere. So it's like nothing's a necessity, but you're gonna learn from somewhere. And Lord Maitreya, he didn't have an official guru, but he gave credit to 24 different experiences in his life, people in his life that he saw. They weren't all people. Some of it was nature, but he's like, oh, I learned from this person not to care about this. I learned from that person not to care about this. And Lord Maitreya is a very respected sage in the world, and he could have acted like a genius, like, oh, I didn't learn from, he even gave credit to strangers, like this guy gave credit to people he didn't even know. And it's like that's how like selfless this guy was, Lord Maitreya. And it's like the beauty of just giving credence to the masters is like, it shows the love that you have for the people that came before you, and it shows the love that you have for wisdom. And it shows that you're not doing this for you. You're doing this to spread wisdom. You're not doing this to feel like some prophet. You're doing this for you. In a sense that, I mean, you're doing this for everybody, or you're doing this for the sages. In a sense that, if you notice, every single sage has learned from somewhere. We might not, a lot of devotees, they have a lot of love for Ramana, so they say, oh, he didn't, he had no guru, he was this genius, this, that. Ramana, 100%. There was no way that Ramana didn't hear a Bhagavad Gita verse growing up in India. He even mentions the Bhagavad Gita. He quotes the Bhagavad Gita. He even advises his devotees to read the Bhagavad Gita. So it's like, a lot of people, they don't think these scriptures are important, but every sage, it's like, whether we're reading traditional teachings or not. And I almost feel bad for a lot of American teachers, because I feel like they're like, a lot of people teach in America, but it's like they're not being given credit for like the spiritual knowledge. Like spiritual knowledge has almost become like fast food in a sense. It's where people are grabbing knowledge, and then it's like there's no like you know, people, you don't remember the guy who gave you your fries at McDonald's, but you sure remember how good it tasted, right? So that's what's happening, is like people, they're forgetting who gave them the fries at McDonald's and the appreciation for the worker, and they're just enjoying the meal and saying, oh, I made the fries on my own. And it's a weird thing in the West. And I noticed that if you just look at even the cultural differences, you'll understand why credit is given differently. It's like the East is a lot more selfless. It's a lot more of a sharing culture. It's a lot more less individually focused. And then you look at the West and they say, I don't need no, it's very culturally, it really shows. It really shows culturally the difference about why, you know, the views on gurus are different. I love what Liam was saying. It's that, okay, of course, the inner guru leads us to that. But I mean, if you have that love, you give credit to the people who taught you before, unless, you know, what I can't even like, this shit doesn't even make sense. Like you were like, somebody's a baby, and then all of a sudden, like spontaneously, like, they're just like, even Anandamayi Ma, like she even said that like the mudras, she started performing mudras and stuff like spontaneously. She didn't learn from a guru. But you know what helped her understand herself? The scriptures, the past writings. Because people, they used to actually call her crazy. Anandamayi Ma, they used to call her crazy. So it's like, if this woman didn't have the example of past sages and past woman sages to learn from, it's like, how is she going to be aware of herself in this material world and know like what she is? Is she's just going to be viewed as crazy in a sense? So we all learn from somewhere. Even the greats like Anandamayi Ma, who from 5 years old was showing signs of self-realization. Even them, they gain awareness by hearing about other saints and sages and stuff like that. And whether they choose to give credit or not is completely up to the person, because there are no rules in the absolute. So nothing's really necessary.
Thank you. We're getting to the end of this, and you know, in my perspective, I have a guru, and I've had a guru all my life actually. So for me, having an established lineage is very important, because it can guide you on some of the very easy pitfalls. The very, as I say, it's a word in Sanskrit and Hindi, suksham, this very subtle ego that can occur from spiritual practice, or even awakening that can happen as well. So an established lineage kind of stops that from happening. I'd written down, because I think Artem, you said that you got ego death from LSD, and you know, I wrote down here that the greatest drug for me is the guru, because the guru gives that wisdom that actually gets rid of the ego, and creates that ego death. In fact, I would say the guru is not the body, but is the wisdom, or is the direct perception of the ultimate reality, that wisdom that knows that reality. The guru is just that embodiment, you know. And every, you know, the gurus that I've listened to throughout the years, they've always maintained that the ultimate truth is more important than their own selves. And that's when you know they're a good guru, because they give credit to the teaching rather than themselves. So yeah, I mean, I personally believe in tradition. I also see, you know, I also see, you know, I do give credit to the more modern teachers too. It's good to have modernization, but again, some of the traditional things are good and should be kept. And there's some amazing Western teachers, I would say, who are following lineages, like Swami Tidatmanandaji and a lot of the Ramakrishna mission teachers who are from the West, brilliant in their approach. And then even when you go to Neo-Advaita teachers, there's some that have really helped others, and we cannot take credit away from that either. So yeah, I think we're good with time. I think we've established a lot. It's been a good discussion. I know you know, a discussion is good when it gets a bit heated, then it cools down, gets heated, gets cooled down. That's part of the process of learning. That's you know, there's a word, tapasya, in Sanskrit, which is like you're getting burnt, you know. So hopefully, some of us, well, I still think I have an ego, so a bit of my ego probably has got burnt today. You know, I'm grateful for all of you, and I appreciate the time. I know we had more questions, and if we all agree, we can even meet again at some point to go over the other questions, which, you know, touch on some very important things today, um, and again, the modernization of teachings. I know today we talked more about the traditional aspect, but now the next part will be probably the more philosophical and more modernized approaches, and looking at that properly. So, but what I want to do is actually give all of you just a minute just to kind of give your concluding thoughts, and then we'll, you know, say bye and respectfully say bye to each other. So what we'll do, we'll go from the at the beginning, from you, Artem, Eric, Guruji, and Liam. Okay.
So I wanted to mention that first of all, like all this knowledge is inside of you. All the spiritual knowledge is inside of you, instead of anybody. And what meditation and psychedelics do is that they make it visible. So that's actually why in complete enlightenment, psychedelics don't work anymore at all. Like there's a famous story of Ram Dass giving 12 tabs of LSD to Neem Karoli Baba, who was an authentically enlightened master, and I confirmed that. And he wasn't affected at all. So that's kind of my experience. And it's a testament to the fact that all knowledge is internal. So the guru can only help you guide you there, but it's still your path. So speaking to the audience, it is still your practice. It is still your meditation. And if you want to experiment with psychedelics, please do it slowly. Don't take huge doses. That's reckless. So meditation practices can be extremely efficient. Working with teachers can be extremely efficient for as long as you keep focus of your investigation on yourself, not on scriptures, not on enlightened sages, not on lineages, not on your teacher even. You know, who cares? On yourself. The teacher is only efficient, any teacher in the context of spirituality is only efficient as far as he can help, or she, as they can help you realize something about yourself that you have forgotten, that you have always known, but you were in denial of. So that's the only measure of a teacher. If the teacher does not help you to realize or see something about yourself in any way, about how you behave, why you behave a certain way, why you struggle with certain things, what your illusions are, what your misconceptions are, what your misperceptions of reality are, then if your teacher doesn't help you do it, then it's a bad teacher. And if the teacher helps you do it, then it doesn't matter where he is spiritually speaking at all, for as long as they help you do it. You know, your grandmother could help you do it if you listen, actually, and reflect. So that would be my kind of parting speech. Is focus on yourself. As Gautama said, be the light onto yourself. It's your journey. And gurus and masters and scriptures, nothing but help, but it's your journey.
Thank you, Artem. Now to you, Eric.
Well, it ultimately comes down to dispelling illusion and delusion and seeing what is as it is and always has been. And so ultimately, you already have everything that's required. It's within you. No one can give it to you. It's not going to be found outside yourself. Anywhere out there is the wrong direction. You have to turn within, so to speak, and look at your own beliefs, your own concepts, your own misunderstanding, and see through the confusion and realize that which has always been the case. And that's really the key.
Thank you, Eric. Guruji?
Yeah, I just want to say, everybody listening to this, just make sure you run away from people who they tell you enlightenment is based on how you behave. There was a sage, Shankar Maharaj, and he used to actually curse, and yell at people to awaken them. And a lot of people, I call it's this toxic positivity, in a sense that, they feel like enlightenment is based on how you behave, but then you have like a Dalai Lama who is given his role and then behaves all peaceful in public, and then you see videos of him doing weird stuff to children. So it's like, Sage Siddhartha was asked by a lady. She was like, how can you be enlightened? You seem angry and grumpy all the time. And Nisargadatta says the only time an Inyani truly rejoices is when another Inyani becomes an Inyani. And Nisargadatta was joking in a sense that another Inyani would understand him, because don't get caught up in the appearances of enlightened masters, such as, oh, they behave this and that way, so I must behave this and that way, and that means I'm enlightened. No, an enlightened master is beyond his appearance, is beyond his behavior. Sage Ashravata said, and this is why, I love the ancient scriptures. He says, somebody who pays attention to the words and the behaviors and the appearance of a sage will never attain self-realization, because the behavior and actions of a sage have no clue to his inner illumination. So just get beyond ideas of morality when it comes to enlightenment and run away from those, because you're always blissful no matter what. Krishna was even blissful throughout a war. So no matter what you do, you just remember that you are inherently nirvana. So don't get caught up in morality when it comes to enlightenment, and run away from people who give you codes of conduct, or you should behave this way, you should behave that way. It's like all the masters just are, their silence in disguise. They're silence in the form of words. All their words are just silence. So don't get confused with the form of the master, because there is no form. It's all formless. The form of the master is temporary. So don't be scared of gurus and have spiritual ego in a sense. Oh, I mean, if I listen to this guy, I'll never be free. No, a true guru will never allow you to be attached to him. Gurus, they want to chill and be free. They don't want anybody. No guru wanted to be a guru. So they just want to chill and be free. They don't want you to be attached to them. So don't be scared of gurus, because if you're a true seeker of freedom, you will never be enslaved by a guru. So, and a guru will never want to enslave you. That's impossible. But because a true guru, he's the embodiment of freedom. So there's no chance of you getting caught in any trap, because there is no trap. He's just trying to free you. So don't trap yourself with your own fear, and just be open and give credit and credence to who you learn from. Because I'm telling you, the more you're aware of where you're learning from, the more your wisdom sword is sharpened.
You are not free.
Say again?
You are not free.
You're projecting.
No.
Okay.
Well,
I don't need your validation for my enlightenment. But thank you for your opinion. I'm very free. I feel blissful, man. This is a great day. This is a great conversation. And you know what's funny? I think you're free, because the person who's telling me I'm not free is an illusion. So I don't believe anybody's not enlightened. I don't feel higher than anybody. I'm enlightened and somebody else is not. So, brother, I believe you're free. You're just an illusion telling me that an illusion is telling me that I'm not free. But you seem very angry, and you want to poke holes in me, say I talk too much, say I'm not free. You're trying to prove some point. I don't know what subconscious thing you got going on.
Warning people.
I'm done with you, man. I'm not gonna lie. It's just Satan Siddhartha used to send people out like you. So let's get to Liam and let's move on.
Can we move on to another individual? Thank you.
Well, today has been a very eventful conversation. And I think it has, in many ways, been a productive one. So I thank you all for being here together, and Rahul for setting this up. I'd love to come back with you all. I've definitely learned a lot in this process. And I wanted to end with a short 1-minute story of something that happened with Advaita for me since the last time we spoke, Rahul, on this platform of yours, where I was getting immersed in Advaita, non-duality, but at the same time my suffering was increasing more and more, and my anxiety was a lot behind the scenes. After your last interview with me, the first thing I did was I'd pick up my vape and I'd take a big hit. Or I'd go home and I'd hide in my room. And, you know, my internet persona was very spiritual, but my personal life was filled with a lot of suffering. And at some point, I had to acknowledge the fact that it wasn't working for me. The relationships in my life were suffering. You know, I was becoming a bitter person, and just saying over and over to myself, Aham Brahmasmi, Tattvam Asi, you know, I am the ultimate reality. Even all this suffering is Maya, illusory. It has a way of only increasing the anxiety, I've found. So I was very humbled in that regard. And during a span of 3 days when my anxiety wouldn't go away, I was throwing up repeatedly. I couldn't fall asleep, and no amount of non-dual teaching helped me. And that's not anything against non-duality. That's a personal thing. I was not ready for it. And with nothing else to do, I started chanting. Instead of trying to internalize truth that the ultimate reality was inside of me, with nothing else, I imagined the form of Sri Krishna before me, and I just started chanting, you know, with my manjira, perhaps. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. And I kept doing that for hours and hours, and over the course of weeks, my anxiety went away. I got my appetite back. My friendships in my life started to actually become healthy again. I was able to quit vaping and take on the vow of brahmacharya. And I say this not to say that this is the way, but it is possible to get through that experience. And I wouldn't have believed it unless I went through that myself. I think, although I was very much immersed in jnana, that path of knowledge that Krishna talks about in the Bhagavad Gita, I was very much lacking in my karma yoga and my bhakti yoga. I wasn't being a good son, a good brother, a good friend, and I certainly wasn't acting with loving devotion towards this source of life. And so some part of me had to exist in duality. I had to see the holy other in order to truly understand my own needs and wants. And it is with that understanding that I come here today. And I think I'd like to end it there. Thank you.
Wow, that was a beautiful story, man. Thank you for telling that. Wow, that was
Thank you.
amazing.
Thank you, Liam. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I know since our last conversation, it's been some time, but yes, I did get a lot of feedback from that interview, and the amount of feedback I got was really positive, and I'm glad people found benefit in that. And also now, also in your evolution in your practice, I pray that more people get attuned to your message and understand it. And I do believe, I think it's in the Bhagavad Gita where Sri Krishna talks about Gyan and Bhakti being two wings of the same bird. And I think in the West, we tend to forget the Bhakti element that is needed to support Gyan. So I definitely think that is required. There's a lot. Otherwise, Gyan can be rather dry, and the juice that you need it comes from the bhakti element, the devotional aspect. So,
Something I'd love to discuss if you do another one of these.
yeah. We should. And yeah, I just want to just thank each and every one of you for today. For participating in this, for being kind-hearted to be part of it, and we got to learn each other's perspectives and understand each other's paths, and I think that's very beautiful. And I hope that the audience finds something in this and they also learn from each one of you. I will put a link to everyone's YouTube channel in the video description, so they can contact you or subscribe to your YouTube channels. That would be really good. And yeah, and just I would say keep growing and prospering on this journey, and we hopefully we'll see you again very soon. We'll communicate with each other on the next possible date, and yeah, just again, thank you for your time, and I pray to God that may, or to the Lord, or to our inner self, that may this wisdom that we have continue to grow and shine a light in other people's lives as well as our own. Okay, thank you. Namaste, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, my friend.